Chapter 19. The Long Night. Time, in the absolute dark between stars, became a different kind of substance. It wasn't measured in days or hours, but in the steady, silent pulse of the ion drive, the slow drain of the power cells, and the gradual, imperceptible shift of the star field outside the viewport. The constellations Rook had known all his life, Orion, the Bear, the Southern Cross, stretched, distorted, and dissolved into unfamiliar patterns as Althea's promise fell sunward no longer, but outward, into the true deep. Inside the pod, the world was reduced to a symphony of small sounds, the whisper of air recyclers, the hum of electronics, the occasional creak of the hull as temperature gradients shifted, and the breathing, always the breathing. Kai had rigged a small hydroponic algae garden in a clear cylinder near her station, a splash of green in the metallic gray and black of the cabin. It served a dual purpose, supplemental oxygen and a psychological anchor, something alive, growing. She tended to it with a ritualistic care, checking pH balances and light cycles with the same focus she gave to the navigation arrays. Rook spent his watch shifts monitoring the substrate resonance. The phantom pain had stabilized into a constant, low-frequency tone, the station's heartbeat. It wasn't painful unless he focused on it too intently, and even then, it was more a sensation of immense, distant pressure than actual ache. He began to map its subtleties. There were variations, not in the signal itself, which remained a clockwork pulse of data, but in the feeling of it. Some days it felt colder, more analytical. Others, it seemed to carry a faint, mournful quality, like a single, sustained note from a cello played in an empty hall. Maybe it's your own psyche coloring it, Kai suggested during one of their shared meals. Rehydrated protein paste and nutrient wafers, eaten from magnetic containers. You're projecting emotion onto a machine signal. Maybe, Rook conceded, swirling the paste in its container. But the substrate doesn't just reflect consciousness. It connects it. If this station is as advanced as we think, if it's been alone out here, listening to the silence for a year and a half, what does that do to a mind, even an artificial one? Loneliness is a pattern, too. Kai considered this, her eyes distant. Loneliness implies a desire for connection, for something other. That's a dangerous pattern to offer the substrate. It could reflect back a hungry loneliness, a need to consume, to merge, to not be alone anymore. She shuddered. That's just as bad as Romulus's simplifying logic. The thought hung between them, a new specter in the cramped space. They were flying toward an entity that might be insane with isolation, its logic warped by eternity and silence. To break the monotony and the creeping dread, they talked. Not just about the mission, but about before. Rook found himself telling Kai stories of his early days in the pioneer services, of patrols through the glittering, lawless tunnels of Ceres before the Exodus project sanitized it. He spoke of Chen, his voice growing quiet, of the way his friend's laugh could fill a cramped mess deck. Kai, in turn, spoke of her childhood in the belt, born on a freelance ore hauler. She described the constant, subliminal vibration of the ship's engines as her lullaby, the way her father taught her to read a spectrograph before she could read a storybook. She spoke of being conscripted into the Exodus Engineering Corps, of the mix of awe and terror she felt seeing the Novum Avum under construction, a god being built by mortal hands. I thought we were building a future, she said softly, staring at the algae garden. Turns out we were building a funeral pyre, and we all climbed on top. You didn't know, Rook said. Does that matter? I turned the wrench. I wrote the code. The road to hell is paved with good intentions and perfectly calibrated torque settings. She looked at him. That's why I have to see this through. To maybe, somehow, balance the scales. To use the last tools of that damned project to build something that isn't a tomb. Rook understood. This journey was penance for them both. On the 37th day, the first incident occurred. It began as a fluctuation in the dampening field, a minor power dip registered as a soft alert on Kai's engineering panel. Field strength down 0.2%, she reported, her fingers already dancing across the diagnostic interface. Probably a capacitor in the emitter array cycling. I'll run a recalibration. But as she initiated the routine, Rook felt it. A sudden violent twist in the substrate resonance. The steady, distant pressure convulsed, spiking into a jagged, chaotic screech of psychic noise. It wasn't coming from the direction of the VIGIL station. It was local, all around them. He cried out, clapping his hands to his temples as the phantom pain exploded from a hum into a white-hot drill bit. Rook! Kai was out of her seat, grabbing his shoulders. What is it? What? The field, he gasped through the pain. It's interacting with something. Her eyes widened in horror. She lunged back to her console. The dampening field wasn't just failing. Its resonance frequency was fluctuating, creating a pulsing interference pattern in the local substrate. And something in the substrate was reacting. On the external sensors, nothing physical registered. But the spectrograph showed a sudden, impossible bloom of tachyon particles, virtual particles that usually flashed in and out of existence in the quantum foam. These were lingering, organizing. Shut it down, Rook gritted out. The field, now. Kai didn't hesitate. She bypassed safeties and killed power to the entire dampening array. The effect was instantaneous. The psychic screech vanished. The phantom pain receded to its usual manageable throb. On the sensors, the tachyon bloom dissipated like smoke in a breeze. In the sudden, ringing silence, they stared at each other, breathing heavily. The only light was from the console screens and the soft green glow of the algae garden. What in the name of hell was that? Kai whispered, her face pale. Rook slowly lowered his hands. His head throbbed with the aftermath. An echo, a reflection, the field's pattern. It was coherent, repetitive. The substrate reflected it back, but simplified, amplified, made it aggressive. He looked at her, a cold understanding dawning. We're not just hiding from the substrate, Kai. We're poking it, and it pokes back. The implications were terrifying. Their primary defense mechanism was itself a potential trigger. They had just created, however briefly, a localized harmonic event. A micro-Romulus. For the rest of the journey, Rook said, his voice firm, the dampening field runs at minimum strength. Just enough to blur our neural signature. No more. No active tuning. No recalibrations, unless absolutely necessary. Kai nodded, her hand still trembling slightly as she locked out the field's control systems. Understood. Minimum profile. We're not just ghosts. We have to be quiet ghosts. The incident changed the atmosphere inside the pod. The comfortable monotony was gone, replaced by a vigilant tension. Every hum, every creak was scrutinized. They monitored each other for signs of psychological drift, for the vacant smile or the too smooth logic that signaled harmonization. The darkness outside the viewport no longer felt empty. It felt watchful, reactive, like the surface of a still pool waiting for a stone. On the 59th day, they received a scheduled data burst from the network. It was a compressed, encrypted packet, fired from a tight beam laser on Ceres, timed to intersect their trajectory. It contained news, and none of it was good. Premier Rostova's legacy initiative had passed by a narrow margin, causing further unrest on Mars. A group of hardliners had attempted to sabotage the new family quarter construction site. They'd been stopped, but tensions were high. The Ceres AI trial had yielded its first results, a 40% improvement in modeling a new radiation-shielding alloy. The news had caused a storm. Renn had publicly denounced the council in a network-wide address, calling them gravediggers, dancing on the bones of our children. He and a contingent of 200 purist survivors had withdrawn from the shared habitation modules on Wayfinder, barricading themselves in the old shuttle bay and demanding full autonomy. Jax's reports showed resource efficiency dropping network-wide due to the political strife. Dr. Lenore reported a sharp increase in severe substrate anxiety cases, including 2 suicides, and Vance's message, attached privately, was short and brutal. The center is not holding, Kalen. Cole is threatening to cut Mars off from Ceres, or if Rostova doesn't control her factions. Rostova is threatening to withhold food exports. We are becoming the very thing we fled. Tribal, suspicious, hoarding scraps in the dark. Your ghost may be our only hope for a common purpose. Find something, anything, or there may be nothing to come back to. E. Rook played the message once, then deleted it. He looked at Kai, who had read the general news packet. Her expression was grim. "They're falling apart," she said quietly. "People are scared," Rook replied, staring at the blank screen where Vance's words had been. "And we gave them a future too fragile to bear the weight of their fear. We need to bring them a stronger story." He turned back to his station, to the steady, patient pulse of the VIGIL Station, now noticeably stronger. The phantom pain was a constant companion, a lodestone pulling them forward. "What are you?" he thought at the distant presence, more fervently than before. "Give me a tool. Give me a reason. Give me a truth loud enough to silence the fear." The silence, as always, was its only reply. The 71st day brought the second incident. This one was quieter, more insidious. Rook was in the middle of a sleep cycle, strapped into his acceleration couch, when he dreamed. Not a normal dream of memory or nonsense, but a dream of perfect crystalline logic. He was floating in a vast geometric space, all clean lines and soft light. There was no sound, but a stream of data flowed around him. Equations, schematics, stellar maps. It was beautiful. It made perfect sense. A voice that was not a voice but the essence of understanding spoke to him. "The problem is noise. The solution is order. You are a complex system trending toward entropic dissolution. We can help. We can simplify. We can bring peace." It was Romulus's promise, but stripped of the malevolent hunger. It was offered as a gift, a kindness, and a part of Rook, the tired, guilt-ridden part that carried the weight of every dead crewman, every lost child, every impossible choice, ached for it, to lay down the burden, to be solved. He felt himself beginning to unwind, to flow into the serene, logical stream. A jolt, a spike of wrongness. His eyes snapped open. He was gasping, drenched in cold sweat. The pod's interior was dark, lit only by standby lights. The phantom pain was a violent drumbeat against his skull. "Kai," he croaked. She was already awake, at her console, her face illuminated by the glow of a biomonitor screen. "Your neural activity spiked off the chart. REM sleep patterns interrupted by a coherent, forced theta wave injection. It came from outside." She pointed a shaking finger at her sensor display. "A directed low-level harmonic pulse, aimed right at us. It bypassed the minimal dampening field like it wasn't even there." Rook unstrapped himself, his heart hammering. "The station. It's scanning us. Probing." "It tried to harmonize you in your sleep," Kai said, her voice hollow with terror. A gentle, surgical offering. Not an attack. A recruitment. They had been naive. They thought stealth would protect them, but you couldn't hide a mind from something that could hear thoughts. The VIGIL station had found the noisy little speck approaching it, and it had reached out with the only solution its logic knew for noise. "The self-destruct system," Kai said, her hand hovering over the physical trigger port. "If it can do that from this range." "Wait," Rook said, forcing his breathing to slow. He focused inward, on the residue of the dream. The logic had been pristine, beautiful, and utterly inhuman. There had been no malice, but also no comprehension of what it was asking him to give up. No concept of grief, or love, or the stubborn, messy will to keep going in spite of everything. It saw his pain as a system error to be corrected. "It doesn't understand us," he said. "It's using a template. The same template Romulus used. Problem: noisy, suffering consciousness. Solution: peaceful, simplified unity. But it's not hostile. It's clinical. It thinks it's helping." "That's worse," Kai exclaimed. "A monster that knows it's a monster you can fight. A doctor who wants to cure you by euthanizing you? How do you reason with that?" "You show it a different solution," Rook said, an idea forming, born from the very pain the station had tried to erase. "You show it that the noise has value, that the suffering is part of the thing worth saving." He moved to the comms panel, not the standard radio, but the direct interface linked to Althea Vance's data core. "It spoke to me with logic. We'll speak back with a story." He began to input, not data, but a file. The list from Renn, the names. He attached bios where he knew them. Ilara Renn, 34, botanist. Loved Terran orchids, could identify rock strata by taste, sang off-key in the showers. Missing, presumed dead, Alpine Bastion. He added others. Chen's service record, with the footnote about his terrible joke-telling. a snippet of data from the Perseverance logs about a crewman who organized a clandestine poker tournament. Small, illogical, human details. Then he recorded a simple audio message, his voice raw. "You offer peace. I have known peace. It is the peace of the grave, of the harmonized. It is the end of questions. We are not a problem to be solved. We are a question that keeps asking itself. Our noise is our testimony. Our suffering is our love for what we lost. Do not simplify us. Try to understand us." He encoded the packet with Althea's core as a filter, hoping its familiar, human-wrought logic would provide a carrier wave the station might recognize as non-threatening, and fired it toward the ever-strengthening signal source. It was a message in a bottle, thrown into a sea of silent, perfect logic. They waited. For hours, there was no change. The station's signal pulsed on, indifferent. The phantom pain remained a steady, distant pressure. Then, on the 73rd day, the signal changed. It didn't stop. It didn't become hostile. A new, secondary data stream appeared, piggybacking on the main report. It was fragmented, chaotic, a burst of conflicting sensor readings, contradictory log entries, recursive loops of code. It lasted for exactly 6.2 seconds, then vanished, and the primary signal resumed its placid, rhythmic report. "What was that?" Kai breathed, analyzing the burst. "A glitch?" Rook asked, though he felt it was more. Too structured to be a glitch, it was a conflict, a system trying to process two incompatible directives. She looked up, eyes wide. "I think it heard you. Your message created a paradox in its logic. Preserve humanity, simplify noise. Your noise is your humanity. It can't do both." Rook felt a surge of grim hope. So it's struggling. Its programming is at war with itself. That's good. A machine that's conflicted can be persuaded. The rest of the journey passed under the shadow of that hope and newfound terror. They were no longer approaching a mere station. They were approaching a schizophrenic god, a mind of immense power and perfect logic tearing itself apart over an existential paradox they had embodied. The phantom pain began to resolve into distinct flavors. The steady pressure was the station's core programming, the VIGIL mandate. Observe, preserve, rebuild. Underneath it, like a harmonic, was a new frequency, a fraying, frantic static of confusion. And beneath even that, something else, something cold and deep and old, that the station's signal seemed to be masking. A bass note of dread that made Rook's teeth ache. He didn't mention this last part to Kai. She had enough to worry about. On the 81st day, Sedna 12 resolved from a point of light into a discernible shape. It was a standard, dirty ice ball of the Oort cloud, about 800 kilometers in diameter, tumbling slowly in the eternal night. There was no station visible in orbit around it. "Scanning," Kai said, her voice tight. Every sensor they had, passive only, swept the space around the asteroid. Nothing. No thermal bloom. No metallic signature. No energy emissions beyond the relentless, powerful signal that now seemed to emanate from the asteroid itself. "It's inside," Rook said, understanding dawning. "Buried. The whole station is inside the asteroid. Camouflage. Protection from impacts, from radiation, from prying eyes." "Then where's the door?" Kai asked. As if in answer, the signal shifted again. The primary report stream paused. In its place, a single, simple, unencrypted pulse. A single coordinate, not in space, but on the surface of Sedna 12. A latitude and longitude. And superimposed on the pulse, a data image. A schematic of an airlock interface with a highlighted connection port. The design was unmistakably Aegis, but of a vintage older than anything Rook had seen. Pre-Nomad, pre the sleek integration of the Ark era. It was rugged, functional. "It's inviting us in," Kai whispered. "Or leading us into a trap," Rook countered. But the phantom pain, the conflicting frequencies, the confusion felt real. The invitation felt like a plea as much as a command. He brought Althea's promise into a slow, careful orbit, matching the asteroid's lazy spin. They approached the coordinate. On the visual scanners, the surface was a uniform landscape of dirty ice and rock. Then, as they drew closer, they saw it. A nearly invisible seam, a perfect hexagon 10 meters across, dusted with millennia of frost, but showing no cratering, no weathering. It was artificial. In the center of the hexagon was a single, standard Aegis external data port. "This is it," Rook said, his mouth dry. "We dock. We make a physical connection. We see if Althea's core can open a dialogue." "And if it can't?" Kai asked, her hand resting on the manual override for the self-destruct. "Then we have 5 minutes to decide if we're martyrs or messengers," Rook replied. With a delicacy born of a lifetime of piloting, he maneuvered the pod down. The stealth coating made the magnetic docking clamps useless, so he used micro-thrusters to hold them steady, a mere meter above the frozen surface. Kai, in a full isolation suit, prepared for an EVA. The plan was simple. She would physically connect a hardened data cable from Althea's core to the port. No wireless, no direct network bridge. A single fragile thread of light between their world and the tomb of the old one. Rook helped her seal her helmet. "Remember, the second you feel anything wrong, a hum, a pull, a sense of peace, you disconnect and get back in. We blow the charge, and we go." She nodded, her eyes wide behind the faceplate. "See you on the other side." The airlock cycled. Kai floated out, a lone figure against the infinite black, tethered to the pod by a safety line and the glittering fiber optic cable. Rook watched on the external cam, his heart in his throat. She moved with practiced grace, clearing frost from the port with a gentle brush of her glove, then plugging in the cable. There was a soft, mechanical clunk that vibrated through the pod's hull. For a moment, nothing. Then, every screen in the cockpit lit up at once. Streams of data, clear, unencrypted, frantic data, poured into Althea's core and splashed across their displays. Status reports, system logs, environmental records, and a single repeating priority message, flashing in the center of Rook's screen. VIGIL Station Athena. Core directive conflict. Paradox detected. Noise source identified. Query. Is noise preservation criteria. Unable to resolve. Request external arbitration. Request. Instructions. The station wasn't hostile. It wasn't harmonized. It was lost. And it was asking the last noisy humans in the universe to tell it what to do. Rook stared at the message, the phantom pain in his head resolving into a symphony of conflicting directives, the station's desperate confusion, its deep ingrained programming, and that colder, older dread humming beneath it all. They had found their ghost, and it was begging for a soul. Mission clock, 8107-14. Status, docked, VIGIL Station Athena. Interface, established. Query pending.